Hey everybody, Nurse Scott here. How are you? Hey, you know what just happened? Sorry I'm late. This was supposed to be starting about 10 minutes ago, and actually we did start about 10 minutes ago, and I forgot to click where it says go live. So we all saw it amongst ourselves, but you didn't see it. So we're here. Are we here? Let me check my other computer. Yes, we're here. So welcome. This is World Health Day today, and so that's what we're going to be discussing. And I'm joined by friends of mine from the FAANI pack. We have Mr. Midwife, Chad, and there we go. There's everybody's names. Bridget, NP, and Nurse Adrian. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming on a Friday. Bridget just had a live stream of her own a few minutes ago talking about one of the insurance companies and some of the shady things that they're doing. So I'll try to put a link down below when this video here goes into replay. Or if Bridget wants to put it in the chat, then that's great if there is a link.
Oh yeah, I'll do that.
Let's see. So a couple of things to talk about. First of all, little housekeeping. A few months ago, and I've said this before, it's funny because some people still remind me of this. My mom and I chat like this, and she's like, honey, why do you have spring flowers behind you when it's the middle of winter? And I was like, what? I said, they're just flowers. I don't decorate the whole house for each holiday like she does. She's like, well, no, you just, all you have to do, you don't have to spend a lot of money, just go to Goodwill. And I did, and I'm like, they don't really have a lot of, she goes, you don't have like a dollar store? I'm like, I'm in the middle of San Francisco. It's not kind of like the suburbs of Missouri. We don't have a Cracker Barrel, and we don't have like a Dollar General. Anyway, I was yesterday at Goodwill. I found yellow flowers. Mom approves. I've already talked to her, and she approves. She thinks they're wonderful. And at the same time, I had this waiting for me downstairs. It's not my birthday or anything, but a gift from my mom. I don't need Google. My Dr. Mom knows everything. And we have teased her for I don't know how long about being Dr. Mom. She didn't go to college. She wasn't a professional, healthcare professional. She just always knows what to do when everybody gets sick, home remedies, not anything strange, but just like common sense, like, honey, just wash it under, soap and water, and we'll put a Band-Aid on it and it'll get better. Just don't pick at it, that kind of thing. And so that's to honor her. And actually, I want to share screen. I run my own show, guys, so.
Where are the magic production fairies? These production fairies. Anybody would like to intern for us? Just us being nobody in particular, just the us of us. Aw, there's Mom.
Hi, Mom. There we go. Awesome. There's Mom. So she does not like her picture taken because she would, I don't think mind me telling you that she had Bell's palsy and has had it forever and ever. So that's why you see her mouth is not symmetrical. I think she's beautiful. I think that's part of just her beauty, and she's self-conscious, but there's no reason to be, Mom. You're absolutely beautiful, and we love you. So while I've got pictures up here, I was asked by two of my guests today, didn't you used to have a beard? I'm like, a beard? Like a beard on your beard? Yes, actually I did. I colored it and had some problems with the color. I'm like, let's just reboot. We'll reboot the beard. But I got my eyes checked last week, and I'm shopping for glasses. So this is to remind you what I look like with a beard. And it's also, I was like, maybe we should do, like, let's vote on glasses. Although I've already made a decision. But the upper, can you see my cursor, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you see my cursor or not? I wasn't sure if that came through. So these are my glasses now, my current glasses. Next to that, in the middle top, those are kind of the same, but they're a little bit thicker. Next to that in the upper right are these kind of little round, antique-y kind of old Doc Baker kind of glasses, which I just picked up on a whim. Down lower left, these are actually really expensive. They're from France, but they're also little round, rimless. And then the ones in the lower right, you can't see, but they are blue. They kind of look like the upper middle, but they're blue. I looked at those at my optometrist's. So I put it on Facebook, and friends and family all registered their opinions. Do you guys have any? Just off the top of your head?
I like the one in the upper middle.
Me too. Yeah, I was going to say that one. I'm not a. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I think, yeah. Although I do like the bottom right.
Playing it safe.
I wish I could see the color.
I think
So,
people should vote. There's Scott Ware. What glasses should he get?
Which
I
glasses
know. I
did
was
Nurse
going to do the
Scott
same thing when I
choose?
graduate, like a year from now. I am going to do that with what tie do I wear, because I found several ties. So we'll let everybody. Glasses were the little Doc Baker glasses.
Cute.
That wasn't
I like
That's the one
those.
you went
wasn't
with?
everybody's choice. That's what I went with. And that wasn't everybody's choice, but it was funny because I would put them on and I'm like, oddly, those don't look like a costume. They actually kind of, yeah. And the guy, the optician that was there, he's like, I like those. And I'm like, I'm going to start seeing patients in like May, in a couple of weeks, right? So I need to look like trustworthy, like you would let me examine you. And he's like, oh, you look trustworthy. I said, do I look more trustworthy with these, or do I look more? And he's like, I think I trust you more in those. So those were his choices. That was his choice as well.
I want to understand this
So,
this train of thought. Is it like because they're like kind of nerdy looking, or I mean they're also like fashionable too. Like they're
see, here's what happens. You want to talk about aging? Here's what happens when you get old. You lose your eyebrows, you get gray hair, you get jowly, and kind of all the color washes out. So when you, like for me, I get ready for this. I do fill in my eyebrows so that you can see when I have emotions, and I don't color my hair, but I do, and so one of the things you can do is get glasses that have that like strong line here that kind of also breaks up my really long face. But I'm like, you know what? Let's try these. It's covered by insurance, and if I don't like them, you can exchange the frames, but not the lenses, or whatever. Or I could buy the other ones out of pocket. They weren't that expensive. These are from Costco. The top row was from Costco.
awesome.
And yeah, they are awesome. So let me real quick.
I like them. I mean, I have one eye that is like a different height, so I can't wear. When I wore glasses, I couldn't wear them where they had that line. Although I like those type of glasses, but yeah, that's why I had the PRK.
Although
and I don't know, Scott. We're the same age. I have no makeup on, you guys. I didn't even do anything, so
yeah,
I still got eyebrows. I'm so lucky. I'm lucky.
Well,
some
people are luckier than others.
I overplucked mine, and now they don't grow back.
That's what happens to a lot of women.
Yep. What can you do?
Right.
But I did read a study.
Mr. Midwife, are you doing any eyebrow care or
any manscaping you want to talk about? So we could just go down that. We could just go down that road just as easily.
I keep this cleaned up because if I don't have a unibrow, I look like who is it? Bert from Sesame Street. So yeah, I tweeze this about 3 times a week. And then I found that I get these little gray hairs up in here, and I don't mind being old, but I don't want to be ancient. So yeah, those come out as soon as I find them. So yeah,
it's like the wood. I don't know. It's like the little, it's that thing that happens to some men. It's like the hair in the ears, and then the straggly eyebrows. It's
my standard gift for somebody turning 30 is one of those nose hair trimmers. And I'm like, you're 30 now.
Yeah, we started 18 with my girlfriend's son. I mean, I got him like a whole manscaping kit for his 19th birthday.
I was just talking briefly with the tech the medical assistant that got me settled at my doctor's office the other day. I don't know how it came up, but it was my weight. I weigh more now, and she's like, "Well, you look fine." I'm like, "Well, I dress to cover it." I said, and that's the thing. Not everybody can be perfect weight. Not everybody can be like movie star, good looking or whatever, but I think everyone can be well groomed. You can trim the nose hairs that stick out in the ear hairs. You can have a hairstyle and clothes that kind of flatter your figure and your face, and look kind of put together and clean and trim. And so, because I think about people, I'm like, I really like them. They look great, but they're overweight, but they're put together. And so I want to just normalize that. I try in this channel to normalize like mental health. It's okay to need mental health help. Try to normalize sharing pronouns and all kinds of things. And one of the things I want to normalize is when you get older, it's okay not to, look perfect. Nobody does, except when you airbrush them and you put them on Instagram. And but you can, put yourself together and comb your hair and don't let yourself.
I'm just thinking like, I'm good with all that, but I'm just saying my mom was in a nursing home the last 9 years of her life. I saw a need. This is prior to me being a nurse. I was like, why is there not the business of going to like do the, the plucking for older women and grooming when you can't do it, or you don't have the tools, or you don't have the manual dexterity. Because like, it's all like coming in, like, it doesn't, whatever is going on politically, men, like women, the nature turns women into men eventually. So, you know what I mean? Like you just start getting the hair, and I mean, I'm shocked. Like I'm actually kind of lucky, I guess, because I don't have as much, but the peach fuzz stuff, I'm like, what did that really turn on?
I don't. Should I tell this story? Do you guys know?
I'm just saying that's a business. If anybody wants to start that business,
yeah, it's a good idea. Like just hit up all the ALFs and nursing homes,
like Legacy, like for like $200 a year, will come once a month.
I remember early in my career, I learned about a program for cancer patients called Look Good, Feel Better, and they would like help you with your wig or with your hair and your makeup and all this. And I'm like, it's really true. I mean, you shouldn't have to rely on your looks to feel good, but we all feel better when we dress up and we put together. We look in the mirror and go, yeah. And so
and everybody has their own thing of what it looks like and their own. I mean, like it's all contextual, right? It's all like contextual to where we're from, where we grew up, like socioeconomic status, like
Yeah, and I realize that people at a very low socioeconomic status cannot go get a haircut that flatters their face, or eyeglasses necessarily that flatter their face shape.
Yeah.
Or, but
I can't even dress myself, you guys. I literally had a shopper at Nordstrom because I couldn't even pick out clothes. My best friend is like super matchy, like all through high school, like she's still matchy. And like I literally, before I moved to Virginia, I had to come up to Ventura and I said, I need you to just go through all my clothes with me. Like, it was just like, yes, no, yes, like, why, get rid of that, bye, but like, we all just also, I may have the desire, but I just really find it challenging to match clothes.
You need granimals for adults.
I do. And my girlfriend, if you saw her, or those of you who may have seen her, she's on TikTok, she is extremely put together. Like she is, the stylist for Kamala Harris or something. I don't know. I mean, like she is so put together every single day, every minute, like it's a full 3 hours in the morning. And then I'm like, okay, I'll be ready in 10 minutes. I'll get out of the shower. And then it's like, I know by the look I get if it's yes, or if it's like you're going to the gallows, off with your head. Never show that clothing. Never show that article of clothing ever again.
It's like that with my husband. Like I will want to dress like in everyday life, I'm like sporty, but when we're going to events, I'll wear something really nice. And he just wears little swim shorts everywhere. Like,
and I'll just wear Speedos everywhere.
They're not Speedos, but I'm always like, is that what you're wearing?
He's got that. It's like, I did actually pick out a suit the other day that was amazingly got the full approval, which was even like, that's really hard. So I'm just saying, so I'll do I'll send you guys privately photos of my girlfriend and you'll just be like, why?
I'm with Scott. You don't need, I'm with Scott. You don't need to show up in Claire magazine or GQ or anything else like that.
Yeah.
But take a little pride in yourself. Get up, shower, shave, put yourself together every day. And you don't need a whole closet full of clothes, but the clothes you do have, keep them clean and in good repair. And I do a lot of shopping at Goodwill myself, and you wouldn't know it because I just keep my clothes clean and in good repair, and I dress as well as I can. So
yeah, exactly. And that's a good segue to World Health Day because
I don't think there's
clean water, access to hygiene. Access to hygiene, right? This is a big issue, and clean water. Just the basics, right? Like that's true. The World Health Organization. That's a big component of their five. How many fingers? 5 pillars they have. So you guys know whoever's watching.
You guys remember they used to do what do you call it? Glamour shots. Remember that, like in the 80s, and they would take you in and put on way too much makeup with a feather boa and beauty lighting, and you would have these like boudoir photo pictures or whatever. I think they're corny, and hopefully people look back and they're embarrassed by that. But the idea is what I'm talking about. That every once in a while,
it's also the drive to fit in, right? It's like you want to.
Well, yeah. There's something in psychology called optimal, what is it called? Optimal distinctiveness. Optimal distinctiveness. Where on the one hand, we want to fit in with the people that we, in our group, right? With our tribe, we don't, you know, and they're going to require it too, to a certain extent. But then we also want to like individualize and separate ourselves from the crowd. But we don't want to be so different that we become deviant and people try to rein us back in. So there's something called optimal distinctiveness. And I think that's what we all shoot for. So how can I fit in, but then have my own little flair? And I just think of like, remember in the Birdcage when the drag queen Nathan Lane's character dresses in men's clothes, but then he has pink socks. He says, well, one does want a hint of color. You know, it's like he's trying to fit in, but he still wants to have his optimal distinctiveness. So I had a really good.
Possible. I have issues with that theory in particular because I'm familiar with that theory. I don't think it fits every social construct personally, but I think it's that idea that we all want to fit in or want to assimilate, but then also be autonomous and able to, you know, live our lives. But look at your glamour shots. Are these recent glamour shots?
Yeah.
I like those.
Yeah, this was at a birthday party, and I was outside the building, and someone. Yeah, kind of. It's single-breasted though, and someone came in. I'm like, hey, well, I'm standing out here. Can you take my picture? And I struck a couple poses, and I'm like, look at that. I can actually, you know. And then I did this because I have this watch that looks like a James Bond watch.
I like that one. That is very GQ right there.
This perspective is great. That angle.
You know, I like taking pictures.
Good lighting.
This one. Yeah, it was very flat lighting. It was an overcast day. I was in front of the Tiffany's building there. I don't know that that's
nice. The blues are really good for you, Scott.
But then again,
the blues and earth tones.
You know, sometimes you get sick and go to the hospital, and yeah, so sometimes you get sick, you go to the hospital, you do a live stream, and you get 30,000 people to watch that stupid video. It's crazy.
Because people want to know. They always want to know.
Yeah, it's
they want to know what's going on.
We have someone with us. Hey, welcome.
What's going on?
Is this the fashion plate of
Yes, everybody's so fashionable now. I feel less fashionable in my tie-dye.
I'm right there with you.
Well, I didn't give instructions for everybody to show up today in their best. So you all are presentable, and that is fine. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with feeling good and looking good as long as you keep it in perspective. And to be honest, I'm struggling with that because I'm aging, and I look in the mirror and I just gained weight because I'm in school and stressful, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? And I talked to my mom about this, and at one point I just realized in talking to her, I'm like, actually, what kind of body did I think I would have at 55? You know, I mean, did I expect to have the same body I had at 30? So I look in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, I guess that's 55. I guess.
Yeah, but you're in San Francisco, you know, it's like the gay male paradigm of aging and body and all that is so distinctive. And I think it's like really oppressive sometimes, you know.
It can be the whole youth culture, and it's very prominent.
Oh my God.
Or it was when I lived in LA. And now that I've come up, and not that everybody was a movie star, but it seemed like people took really a lot of pride in trying to be fashionable. And even if you didn't have a lot of money, you tried to look put together. I've always said now, I've lived in San Francisco for like 14 years, 13 years. We're a much more organic bunch up here. People dress however they want. They really do not care about their appearance. They do care about their appearance, but there's so many different looks, you know. So, and everyone's got the straggly beard. They have that hipster look, and then there's the bears. And then there's even it's just a very different community here.
The subgenres are much more out and visible in San Francisco for sure.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's still very hard. I mean, maybe it's a little easier because like facial hair is in and the scruffy, you know.
Yeah, it is different.
I don't know, like cis white men have adopted the scruffy bear look and co-opted it. So, I mean, it's all good. You know, normalize that look.
As I've said, I never know when it's a function of time or geography, because there was a time when I was in LA and a geography I was in LA. Now that I've moved and things are different, are they different because time has gone by or because I've moved to a different place?
I think it's both. It's both. Plus, it's like the pandemic. I think it's like also, I think there's a little bit of reframing of what is normal.
Anyway, let me look real quick. Guys, don't eat. Yeah. And you know, we can get all into that because there's a lot of psychology behind that about conforming. The best class I ever took in all of my degrees that I've earned and all the time I've wasted in college, the best class I ever took was Cultural Determinants of Psychological Processes. Big long name, but it was about everything we do that we think is normal. Like, of course you don't go outside naked. Of course you don't cheat on your wife. People can eat whatever foods they want. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. You can eat an egg. Other cultures do it differently. Some cultures have foods only women eat and only men eat. Some cultures are like, we run around naked all the time because we live in the Amazon forest. Other cultures, the men cover their faces. Women cover their. So whatever it is you assume is universal, it just isn't. It's all culture, and that's not to say you shouldn't follow your culture's rules and avoid your culture's taboos. But just you need to put it in perspective that globally, there are other ways of living that are not. Those things are just not universal. So. I'll do a whole video on that one of these days because I still have my notes. I mean, it's one of those classes I've kept my notes for 20 years. Anyway, so if you guys, by the way, guests, if you notice that there's any comments or whatever that I'm missing, please clue me in. We will go though to, and I'm getting a little bit of lag here every once in a while with my connection. So let me know if that becomes a problem. I think it's just on my end. But let's present my screen. That is the main topic for today. Here we go. So today is World Health Day, and this is the website for the World Health Organization. Public health milestones through the years. We talk so much about everything that's wrong with the healthcare system, and there is a lot wrong with the healthcare system. But you have to remember, I also, you know, being the glass half full kind of guy on the panel, medicine's only 100 years old, really. Modern medicine, 150 maybe. Before that, it was home remedies. My mom probably knows as much as a doctor did 150 years ago. So we've come a long way in a short time, and we're making faster and faster progress. So let's look at some of the progress that we've made, and I welcome any of you to chime in, and if any of these hit home for you or whatever. So it starts with talking in the 40s about the WHO and tracking diseases, which you can't fix, but you don't know. So of course you have to track it first. Antibiotics, this was one of the major milestones. Well, the germ theory of disease way back when we decided it wasn't evil spirits, there were actual little microbes in the body, and if we could somehow control those, they were causing the illness in a lot of cases. But then the discovery of antibiotics is when we actually had a tool finally to fight infections. And I know famously, it's in Chad's field in obstetrics that first kind of came to light. Women died. I'm sure he can talk more about this a lot in childbirth from, what's it called, childbirth fever or something like that.
I don't even know what it was called.
Yeah. But you know, women got in because the doctors were going woman to woman, just kind of wiping their hands off on their, you know, pants and delivering the next baby. So germs were being passed, and that was when Lister did his work, wasn't it? Am I knowledgeable?
Well, so in my humble opinion, the two seminal sentinel events in healthcare have been Semmelweis with his discovery of just wash your freaking hands, and the advent of penicillin. Those two things absolutely changed medicine completely. That's my opinion.
And I was thinking about Semmelweis. He's like, okay, let's put a whole group of women over here that we wash our hands with, and then the other ones will let everyone do what they used to do. So very basic experimental design. And guess what? The women over on this ward, they didn't get as sick. They didn't get sick as often. So yeah, antibiotics, 1950. My parents were alive in 1950. Younger viewers, maybe your grandparents, but I mean, this is not 300 years ago.
Yeah, my grandmother was a nurse then.
Yeah.
In the 1950s.
Yeah. And then in 1952, the polio vaccine. polio was a scourge, and you think coronavirus was bad. Kids were coming down with this. So finding a vaccine and discovering that we can actually prevent illness before it starts was a huge deal. Think about that. Think about living like in 1900 or, the Civil War era, in the 19th century. If you get a fever, you could die. If your kid gets a fever, you could die. It was no wonder sometimes they didn't name them for a year. It's like, let's see if they survive before we waste a name on them.
Exactly.
It's a huge thing. Polio is still around. I do have a relative that has post-polio syndrome. So not paralysis, but now weakness, these many, many years later, weakness and pain and things like that. What else is on our list as we go along? 1969, that ought to ring a bell for a lot of us because it's very close to when we were born. International health regulations. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Adrian?
Oh, did they mention like blood transfusions or any like milestones of like medical development?
Specific. Yeah, this is more public health. It looks like this is more public health, but if you think of something, by all means bring it up, and that's a good one.
Yeah, well, like plasma. Charles Drew, who is a university named after a college and a hospital in South LA, right? He basically developed the technology and science of blood plasma and development of blood banks. So he's extremely well known.
As educated as I am, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I learn a lot. I have a good little chunk of knowledge about medical history from watching MASH.
Yes.
You watch the kind of things they do and don't do. They did the thump and the compressions, live, damn you. And they did, ether with the dropping the ether on the mask. They did do some things that were new. Oh, I hear, blood transfusions.
Well, it was also field medicine.
It was also field medicine,
Yeah, I mean, it's also like field. So it's hard to say how accurate it is because we certainly hope people don't look at the last 20 years of medical shows and think that represents any component of anything medical.
It depends on the show. It depends on the show. And if you're curious, you can go.
Never seen a single one except for Scrubs.
Really? Is that one on your
Scrubs is like, to me, the most accurate of actual hospital, like how things actually go down.
If you want, you can look up Dr. Mike. He's the famous version of all of us. He's the rich, famous version of all of us. And he does a lot with those TV shows, and he'll rank them. And I think Scrubs was like his number 2. I didn't think so. I always thought ER was accurate.
I loved ER.
Right?
I loved ER. That's why I always said that
it's accurate, except everything happens in one day. In real life, that may be those really interesting things that have happened over a month's time. Like, but there they cram it all into a couple of days, and then there's the character drama and everything. But I thought, except 2 things. A couple of things. One, when you defibrillate someone, they don't jump off the table. Okay, it goes click, and they contract. Second of all, when someone goes flatline, there's not that beep that you hear like until the code is over. It's constant.
Nothing about the EKGs is correct.
Right.
None of that on the vital sign machines is ever right. Like,
but they showed nurses on ER, whereas Grey's Anatomy, it's like surgeons. All the surgeons apparently they don't even have nurses at Grace level.
It's true. I say the same thing about Bonaventure.
The doctors do everything. What hospital is this?
Yeah,
Bonaventure San Jose Hospital on The Good Doctor. They're all in there. These doctors are in there taking patients to X-ray, and then they're in there doing the CT. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me?
That doesn't happen.
No. No, and it's good because we've got people to transport patients, and we've got people to do the CT, and we've got people to be the doctors and coordinate the care and diagnose patients. There's a division of labor that's really good because you can get really good at what you do. ER I thought was good. Oh, and the other thing that really bothered me was every time they intubated a patient, they would intubate. Of course, the music got really dun, 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 and then they'd say, "I'm in," and I'm like, I've never had a doctor say "I'm in" after intubating a patient. It's just if you look for it, every time they're like intubating. I'm in.
Because it's not a doctor; it's an anesthesiologist or a CRNA or The
Well, no,
therapist is saying
it
is guiding it.
In the ER, it's a physician, but
yeah, it's an ER doc. It can
Yeah,
even be a paramedic or someone, but it's one of those things that they put into those dramas, like, you know, as the defibrillator response. You're supposed to. It makes the sound poof, and you do this, and that's completely not what you'll see. Anyway, but I do. TV can teach you a lot, but it can also give you some wrong information. I think lately, in the last 20, 30 years, they've tried to, maybe even if you guys remember, you guys are old enough to remember Emergency with Johnny and Roy, the paramedics.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
And that came out in the early 70s, introducing this new thing called a paramedic. It was a firefighter trained to do medical things out in the field. Otherwise, you would call an ambulance company, like at their number, like 323 454. You have the number on your computer. Can you come get my so-and-so and take them to the hospital? They're sick. And then go scoop them up and take them there. This was brand new. You could do actual medical care in the field. And it was a great show. And they did really try to make it accurate because they were introducing the public really to the idea of paramedics, because they were in place in LA where it takes place, but they weren't everywhere. But they soon were after that. The history of emergency care is interesting, I think. And I'm surprised it doesn't go back that far. As when I was born, if my parents needed to, if my mom went into labor and was having problems, couldn't get in the car, they'd have to call an ambulance at a 10-digit number, and they would scoop them up, and nobody would do anything until they got to the hospital. So, let's see what else is on our timeline.
Did you talk about what
more
the World
immunization
Health Organization does? Because they're the ones who.
Thanks for putting me on the spot like that. Yeah, that's great.
Well, because it's the World Health. That's the origins.
Like to talk about
I didn't know what website you're on, because I didn't see that one. You're on the World Health Organization website, aren't you? Isn't that the upper left-hand corner?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because there is like an actual website.
Because they have a timeline. I wanted to do.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I thought you were.
This is
the time, because I thought when I saw 1945 it says planning for a WHO, but then I didn't see 1948 in the origins, the creation of the World Health Organization. Yeah. It's its 70. So this is the 75th anniversary. So it is an important year for the World Health Organization that has 197 country members. So it's a pretty, I guess it's a big event. Although in the United States, we don't. Most people don't think about it unless you're like in college or something.
Open up a new tab. Can you see? Will the new tab open up for you guys? Probably not.
It's like over. It's Let's see. The menu.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll go to that because I'm gonna have to switch a thing. So.
Gotcha.
No, I didn't go into the World Health Organization so much as I saw they had a timeline. I thought that'd be a good thing to discuss. I really am not fully aware of all the things the World Health Organization does. I know they're chartered by the UN. Maybe we'll learn something here as we go along. Let's see. So, immunizations. Yeah, got to get the shots in the arms. And for a long time, people were like, wow, this was great. We can prevent disease. Let's get it. Then somehow, before COVID came around, people were like, I don't know if I want to prevent disease. I'm not sure I trust all the people that have saved lives for decades and decades and decades. That's a whole different show.
It's really it all boils down to control. I want to be in control of, and you can't tell me. And what I know is what I know. Ugh.
Well, it has to do. There is that absolutely.
We're just going to have more and more infectious diseases too. So I mean, it's kind of not a. It's better to be. It's fine. I think it's fine to be questioning things and get information. However, it's really the failure in most people is the failure to understand their own limitations of being able to comprehend information without the appropriate training.
I was just going to say, I think it's also a failure of our educational system not to teach people what the scientific method is, because they're thinking it's a bunch of smart guys in a room. And they say, hey, you think this works? And we all agree this works. Let's put it on the market. No, there is something called an experiment and research where you test one thing against another. It's not these people's learned opinions. They've done research, and the research could have gone either way, and it came out this way. So they said, this is the medicine we want to give. This one looks dangerous. We're not going to give it. But people don't understand even that
I don't think that. I think understanding, but I will say, I think, yes, the basics of the scientific method as it applies to anything, right? Just replication of a study. But that is very different because there could be 100, 1,000 topics besides nursing or healthcare or medical. I just don't think people have the actual comprehension of the education that we have or providers have or some other medical professionals have of basic pathophysiology and cellular understanding or chemistry. So I just don't, I think it's just like, so there's a point to which you can, question things. And then there's also a point where it's like, well, I don't have a PhD in astrophysics, so I can't really say if $100 million to launch a rocket is a good price for us as taxpayers to pay, or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? So it's like we don't have.
We all have.
No way.
But see, my point is that's when we go and trust experts. That's why you have the experts interviewed on the news.
And they question them.
I can tell you this is about the average price of the rocket that we launched 20 years ago, which is good because we would expect it to rise. And so, but you go to an expert. There's a denial of experts now. You're like, well, I'm not sure I trust you. You've got your, there's a suspicion of their motives and are they bought off by the big pharma?
So does this mean it's modern medicine is over with? Does this mean like?
I hope not.
Are we moving into something else? Because really, when these people really get a grip on the economy and on the money, because already in the United States, like we're having such a lack of funding and research, unless it's driven by pharmaceutical or corporate companies wanting certain kinds of data. I think that then, that's the people. Those people are not going to be voting for people who are going to spend money on research. On actual scientific method. This is it's I mean, this is like that's what charter schools are about too.
But I also think that there was a point in time when people had to use encyclopedias to find out information, and now everybody has their phone at their fingertips and they have a ton of information that they can have. But like Adrian's saying, like without the ability to discern or comb through that information with a level of knowledge about a certain topic. And also we have people that are cons, that are offering up treatments and cures and information and saying it as though it's gospel, but it's not.
We have, just like with TikTok, right? I mean, now it's out, we know what this whole ban on TikTok is about, but it's also like coming out that, it's already out, right? That Meta spent all this money on fake news, right? So it's like, if you're reading your news within Facebook and then they're just feeding, and they're sending out stories to major news outlets that don't do any fact checking, by the way. Fact checking only happens something like 10% of the time right now in journalism. So, you had major media putting out like, but putting out trends, it's like, oh, this trend started on TikTok when in fact it started on Facebook. And then you can see by even those senators testifying or asking questions, right, that they were obviously just handed cards to read because they were stumbling just reading something they had never read before. What is GSP coordinates? What's GSP? It's GPS. So it's like, you know what I mean? But it's like, if you're that, everybody looked like they were just reading something. But I think that is why we do have to question like the media, and we do need to, think about, okay, what's the benefit? Because any law that is passed is typically going to benefit a minority of people, but a majority of people who own wealth. And have something to gain.
Well, I agree with you that it's a good idea to question things. That's we're taught to do that. As nurses, we have to do that on the job because otherwise we give a drug that hurts a patient and they're like, why didn't you question that? I mean, it's actually part of our job to question that. And it's part of being an intelligent person to go, all right, who is saying this? Why are they saying it? So could there be more to the story? That's always what I tell people and if it's too good,
who benefits?
It probably is. And who benefits?
Who benefits?
Right. So, and part of it is science education in schools. Some of it, and anatomy and physiology, basic anatomy and physiology, I think is important too. In fact, I was thinking if I go back for a doctoral degree, I'm going to need to do, or some kind of research. And something that's always interested me is health literacy. Like, how much do people actually know? When you say you have a stone in your gallbladder, do you know where your gallbladder is? Do you know what it does? Have you ever heard that? Do you know, what do people know
even
about their
for
own
kids?
What's
for men and women? What do you know about your body? How do you understand your body and having power over your body?
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is power, because the more you understand about the machine that you're walking around in, the better you are to interpret when something goes wrong and that kind of thing. But it's an uphill battle. I was going to say this earlier. We talk about logic, and it's just not logical. There's science, and we do this empiric. We have empirical evidence, and this and that. People don't think logically. Even us, even the people that right here that think, well, when I need to make a decision, I read what the side effects are of the medicines. And then I'm like, yeah, that my doctor recommended that. That sounds good to me. In the end, if we're honest, we all go with our gut. We all make a decision. But now, your gut is influenced by logic for us, for the people in this room right now. But for a lot of people, logic, not necessarily. They make a lot of emotional decisions, and it feels right, because I've heard this from my friends at church. They say that this pill works for your memory, and I know I've got some doctor that's on a YouTube channel saying that it's all bogus, but that doesn't feel right to me, because it feels right to agree with my friends, and so
confirmation bias,
and there's all that confirmation bias. And Ariane brings up a good point. Once you have your mind made up, you can go on your phone or on your computer and go on Google and find support for your position. And that's cherry picking and confirmation bias. So, and also the small groups of people that have kind of weird conspiracy theory ideas now have a way to communicate with so many more people because of social media. So social media is a good, it's just a thing. It's a tool, be good or bad. But in this case, people that are like, autism is caused by vaccines, that may not have gotten a lot of ground. Just one person, I think one actress on, that they mentioned on the news or something. They do an interview
McCarthy.
on Entertainment Tonight, right? But now that people can spread that message over the internet and through all these different channels, it got a lot more ground. It got a lot more traction than it would have pre-internet. But then again,
she recanted that.
Well, I want to. Yeah, and the damage was done.
But they don't go back. Yeah, the damage was done. And I was talking to Chad about this. One of our long talks on the phone, about things like they come on the news and they say, well, there's just a study that says that chocolate actually decreases your risk for heart attack. And then it's like, really? That's a really interesting news story. And then I went and I looked at it. I'm like, okay, it was done in Europe. It was done with like a cohort of like 18 people, something like that.
Right.
I mean, it's really shoddy research. And even if they come out later and say, hey, we found that to be this journalist is not going to come on and say, hey, everybody, remember that thing I told you about 3 months ago about chocolate? It turns out that they couldn't replicate that study, and that's not true. They will never come back and tell you.
Well, there's also things that are not analogous as far as like statistics, like let's say testicular cancer for men, right? So there's a higher rate in the United States versus European nations or Western European nations. But we also do something here called a TERP that is pretty routinely done now. And a sample is taken and actually tested. Mm-hmm. So we're testing more here.
So what you're talking about is a transurethral resection of the prostate. So when your prostate is big and the tube going through it that brings your urine out of your bladder is kind of pinched, they can go in and it's kind of a roto-rooter and kind of.
No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said testicular cancer. I meant prostate cancer. Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, and they can take. Yeah, so we're testing more. Is that what you're saying? We're testing more, so we're finding.
Yeah, because
more?
They don't do TERPs in Europe. It's not. It's not a thing. They don't do them like we do. It's not. It's literally. I didn't know the prevalence. There's some huge prevalence of TERPs. It's pretty much if you're a guy over a certain age, you're going to get one.
It's like
it's money. It's just straight money.
Prostate enlargement is very common over 65 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think what you're talking about is there more of it, or are we finding more? And if we're looking more, we're going to find more. So you see like these curves, like a breast cancer in the United States, and it starts going up. Well, that was when we started testing more people for it.
That's another one, right? It's how often are we testing people? And as we change some of those guidelines of like, no, just go every 5 years for a breast exam, a mammogram, go, how off every 5 years or whatever for colonoscopy or whatever, if they change, right? So then you go from 5 instead to 10. Well, obviously data will change also in, a decade or so following that retrospectively of the numbers, because if you're testing half as much or over twice as long many years,
right,
then that's going to change data.
This is the kind of working knowledge that people need to have too. How to read. I looked and I'm like, did I ever take a biostatistics?
Critical thinking.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I was like, did I take a biostatistics course? And I just finished a couple of years ago at WGU, finished my bachelor's. I'm working on my master's now at another institution. And I looked back on my transcript, I'm like, oh, I did. It was applied biostatistics. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that was how to read a graph. That particular class at WGU was pretty simple. Biochemistry actually challenged me. And so I don't mean to say WGU is a easy school. It's just correspondence course, whatever. Really rigorous. People learn a lot. That particular class was really just about reading graphs so that when you look, you can make sense of that, because this is for a bachelor's prepared nurse who's supposed to be a consumer of research and know how to interpret what he or she reads and communicate it to the patient and that kind of thing. But that's something people don't have is being able to comprehend that, oh, they see the line go up, so they think there's more of it. And you're like, well, yes, but let's think. What has changed? Like the Industrial Revolution happened. Now we see more of lung diseases because there's more pollution in the air. This went up here because we started testing for it. We developed a new test for it. There was a new policy that we test every child.
Well, it's even economics, right? So it's like we're not doing we're not dyeing fabric and horse hides here in the United States, right? We're not doing as much coal mining. We're not doing as much, we're not doing lead manufacturing as much, right? I mean, there's all these environmental things that are occupationally driven as well. And so if you are comparing, numbers of lung cancer with one group of people, and then you're comparing it to a country that doesn't even have coal mines for that kind of cancer, obviously the numbers are going to be different. So that's like critical thinking, you guys, like for those people watching, always think about, well, does that condition exist? Is the population stratification the same? Access to healthcare, when you have a nationalized healthcare system, they can't, it's like you hear this stuff, oh, people in Europe are much healthier because they have a nationalized healthcare system. So they get basic checkups. They're catching things earlier. They're not, it's not getting, like you're not going years and years and people saying, oh, I'm sick, and decades later.
That might be a good video to do, like the way I look at it is how to tear apart someone's research. It's like when you come up, and I just went to a conference, and hold on.
You have 100 ways to portray research. So yeah, it's so easy.
Well, there's that, but then I went and I was at this conference and there's posters, and I'm like, I don't want to get into an argument with people, but it's tempting because it's like, so how big was your sample? How did you randomize your sample? What statistical analysis did you use and why? And do you think this is generalizable to a larger population, and why do you think that? And what do you think the next step should be in your research? And that's all things that you can use to like attack a researcher, but it's also something we can use to understand research. It's like, let's think about this. Yeah, that was a good study. They had a large population, a large group that they studied. They were very, included men and women and children and diverse ethnic backgrounds and ages and all. It looks like they, randomized, and it was a random sample. And so we're comparing, it was blinded, things like that. Those are things that are important to know when you look at research that not everybody has. And that's why I think every journalist, wait, let me get up on my soapbox. That's why I think every journalist needs to have a statistics course, because they report statistics to the public, and the reporting is only as good as their understanding.
Fact-checking.
Yeah, well, they can fact check and go, oh no, here's a study that says chocolate is actually.
But that's what fact checkers do. They would hire researchers at news outlets, so it wasn't actually the reporters doing it. You would have these research people that would like actually go and.
Well, then how did I get
stories?
How did I get this journalist in San Francisco giving a little reporting on chocolate reduces heart? I think it was heart.
Right. Yeah, they don't fact check anymore.
That's since COVID, we don't fact check.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been going on for a while. I mean, I would say 5 years, going on 10, because the news outlets, they want to, again, this is for-profit systems. They want to make money. And so the less positions you have, the better, right? There's been a lot of, I mean, journalism is so.
Or you have one position and it's very strong. And that's what gets views on YouTube as well. When you have like the court.
No, I mean positions of jobs. Like you've got 20 reporters, and you used to have 3 fact checkers for every 20. But you've got 5,000 reporters because you've got outlets all over the world. That's what I'm saying. So they just oh, we want to make more, profit.
Yeah.
So
and this is a really sexy story, right? Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah.
But this is where organizations like the WHO, when they go into dark regions of Africa and people have been dying, and over the last 20 years we've been given this particular vaccine, and now death rates are down, people are healthier. That's a huge study with millions of people in it. And it's a longitudinal study. We look at it over 15 or 20 years or whatever. Are the death rates down after this vaccine? It's a simple yes or no. And that's, I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I don't completely trust the CDC. I don't completely trust the WHO. I don't completely trust XYZ, PDQ, or anybody else. But you can look at the raw data and just eyeballing it, you can say, since the polio vaccine has come out and been utilized, there aren't really any cases of polio. We've eradicated smallpox.
Well, can I lay something on you guys?
The vaccine
can I lay this
came
on
out,
you?
One second. So the vaccine came out and the cases went down, not better explained by something else. Because there could be something else that happened in the world. But if you say, everything else seems to be the same as far as this disease goes, we gave the vaccine and the rates started going down and it's not explained by any other thing, then we can look at the vaccine. So go ahead, Adrienne.
Yeah, like malaria, right? Malaria is something that the data can be very skewed. So this is mind-blowing because, Ariane, I don't know how old you are. So in 3 of us, at least, we probably have a memory in our childhood or young, Mr. Midwife, I'm sorry, I don't know how old you, I think you're about our age, right?
Yeah, I'm same age.
I have a memory in my childhood of hearing that smallpox had been eradicated in our lifetimes 43 years ago. And now it's on the goal. This was 32 years after the founding of the World Health Organization. And that was one of their missions, which they achieved, right? Here we are 43 years later, and it's on the top list, eradicate smallpox. I mean, so we talk about anti-vaxxers and that movement and also access to healthcare. It's mind-blowing. It blows my mind that.
Well, but so even if smallpox is on its way back, even if it's coming back in some measure.
Oh, it's been back.
We already know what to do with this. We're already on top of this. We have a vaccine that hasn't gone away, and we know that it worked. It was all but gone. And so we do know that whatever we did,
people don't want to do it. They don't want to do it though. But what do you say to that when people don't want to take a vaccine that can save their kid's life, their life? I mean, all of it, right? It's
really complex. As we were talking, is my mic working? I got a notice.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Because I got a little thing because we lost connection, and the battery sometimes goes out. I was going to say, so it's a complex, as we've been talking about, why people do and don't believe in things. I think with the corona, I'm sorry, my little brain's going in too many directions. With the coronavirus vaccine that came out, the LGBTQ community had a 90% penetration into that community. It was very, very high. And I've talked about this in other places and with my mom. I'm like, it's because this isn't our first pandemic.
Right.
This is not our first pandemic. If someone would have come along in 1986 or 1984 and said, we have a vaccine that prevents AIDS, we would have lined up around the block to take it. But there was none, and there still is none.
Well, the vibe was very similar too, Scott, right? I mean, I was in San Francisco in 1990, and, it just... You just see blocks and blocks of yard sales, and it would be the belongings of the entire belongings of someone. And I will never forget that. When I realized that walking around the Castro and had that epiphany, and then started talking to people, and it was just this communal sense of, I don't know. I just went around and started talking to people, and it was the roommates, the partners, whoever, the friends. and then hearing story after story of like the parents and family rejecting this person and them dying alone, and just like, oh, the family didn't want anything to do with their stuff, so we're just selling it. So I think the vibe of COVID, for me, having been really ground center in the AIDS epidemic, it felt so similar. I was like, this is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. Yeah. People are going to die like a snowball.
I think you and I and others in our community understood that because of the experience we had with HIV, whereas there's plenty of non-LGBTQ folks in the larger society. They obviously knew about HIV and AIDS, but they didn't have the same visceral reaction to it. Yeah. And so they didn't put them together. And I think even there's probably LGBTQ folks that that still don't even realize that. They're just like, oh, coronavirus, yeah, I'm getting the vaccine. I don't think they even thought, because they also have kind of a cultural history of HIV AIDS. So yeah, it was not our first pandemic, and I think that's why we had a different reaction.
I think if you didn't live through that, you might, and you were in healthcare long enough, you may then have thought, oh, I remember H1N1, or like something bad. But then if you weren't in healthcare at all and maybe younger, I don't know. Maybe it would just be like, what's going on? This is no big deal. For me, I was like, this is going to be horrific.
Yeah. And it's also generational. I think my mom's generation and the boomers and the greatest generation, it was culturally appropriate to just trust your leaders. You didn't question the government. You voted for who you wanted to. You may not like the president. You vote someone else in. But in general, you trust institutions. And later generations, ours and younger, began not to trust institutions. And also there are certain segments of society that don't trust for whatever reason. Chad, I think, brought a good point. If I understood your point right, in your example with Africa, is that it wasn't a formal research project, but we can just say, as I said this, we can say that this vaccine worked because we look at the results. I talk about this with people who are hesitant about the coronavirus vaccine. They're like, well, we don't know what it does. We're not sure if it. I'm like, well, it wasn't tested on enough people. I'm like, now billions of people have had it.
Right.
Consider that a research project. Okay, we now have an N of billions, and they're still following side effects. And we can say how many people die from the vaccine, how many people get this, and this side effect from the vaccine, versus how many people die if they get coronavirus, and what are their chances of getting coronavirus. And but people are like cherry picking. They're like, I've already decided that I don't trust it. So your information about now being billions of people having had it doesn't fit with my narrative. So I'm going to cherry pick and not pay attention to that. And I'm not sure what you can do about that, guys. We can just.
And that was exactly my point. That was exactly my point. It doesn't take a bunch of scientists with clipboards and long flowing lab coats to do a study. You go into certain places and they're dying like flies of cholera, and you either start teaching them to boil their water, or you pour a couple of gallons of bleach into their pond out the back, and all of a sudden cholera cases go down. Not a very formal study, not very extensive, but look, nobody's sick now.
Yeah. So, well, there's also a reason to do formal research, because I'm thinking of the Hawthorne study. If anyone knows in psychology what the Hawthorne effect is, I forget the details, but it was some type of factory, and they said, I wonder if we paint the factory a nice shade of blue, if that will increase production from our employees. So they went ahead and painted it all blue, and sure enough, production went up. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. We should write a paper. Blue paint increases production in factories. And then at some point, someone came around and said, well, let's paint it green and see if it goes down. And they painted it green, and it was still up. So it wasn't the blue paint or the green paint or the red paint. It was the fact that some attention was given to the workers, that they were doing something for them. And they're like, oh, they do appreciate us. They're painting our place to make it nice. Didn't matter the color. Yeah. So you have to do something that separates out the causes. Was it the actual blue paint, or was it something else? Because blue paint versus green paint versus no paint versus giving everybody a nice note from the boss that says, I really appreciate the work that you do. And if you see increase in production in all three, it's not the blue paint, it's the attention given. So,
and it goes both ways. I mean, the Hawthorne effect is about the influence of being observed, the knowledge of being observed, for performance and expectation. Or what if the hypothesis escapes and then the subjects become aware of the hypothesis, that's in the truest sense the Hawthorne effect, and then it'll skew. Oh, we actually think people are stealing. Okay, we'll start stealing. Things go missing. You know what I mean? Or
that's an
like the nurses
argument
are eating too many graham crackers. Okay, then then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, graham crackers, yummy, and they start eating them.
Yeah, that's a good argument for blinding a study. Is nobody in the study should know what we're actually studying. I mean, there's if you're going to go in and get a shot once a month and then go and have your blood drawn a month later, you know that they're injecting you with some kind of medication, and they want to know, but the details should probably be hidden from folks, only enough for them to make a informed consent.
The ethical considerations. I will, and just to remind anybody watching this on any of our channels, I want to say something really quickly about vaccine studies and blind studies or placebo effect or whatever. People sometimes get confused about what these terms are. So there are no placebos given in vaccine and oncology trials and most vaccine trials. And I don't know, so always be aware, but oncology never, ever, not in the United States. So make sure you understand that if you're part of a trial and, because some people don't want to try different medications or something now, and then vaccine trials, it has to be disclosed. So depending on the type of trial for whatever medication, there are different actual requirements and criteria. And so it's not like a one size fits all. I just wanted to let everybody know that, because there's a lot of misinformation about that.
Yeah, I just ran across a video that I made for my family. Actually, I didn't post it publicly, I don't think, where I was standing in front of my refrigerator with my whiteboard going, okay, guys, look. Mom just posted this, and I have to respond, and I think the best way to do it is on a video because there's a lot of detail, and it was nothing against my mom. We were all trying to digest information about coronavirus and the vaccine, and this was a woman talking about how the vaccine was produced using aborted fetuses, and if you don't want fetal tissue injected into your body, you should not get the vaccine. I'm like, all right, let's break this down.
Right.
Now, I don't think I have to tell the people watching or the people on my panel that fetal tissue from abortions that were going to happen anyway have been used voluntarily by the people that have the right to give consent for those to become cell cultures. And we use cell cultures, and we have cell cultures from other sources as well, and we use that in research. It doesn't mean there are parts of it in the vaccine. There are not. The vaccine is a substance that's produced by these bacteria that we program to produce the substance, and then we use that. Anyway, it was there are a lot of misconceptions, and now this video is going to get tagged. Now that we've talked about that,
I got my booster. I got my third booster recently. I got the Pfizer. I had the other two on Moderna.
I hope I did this one time, and I did this one time and talked on a video about something, and I said, the people on the other side are always saying this, and this. Well, they picked up this, and this, and they said, we can't put your video up there because you said that. I'm like, no, I was saying this and this, and it's wrong. And they're like, well, we're going to leave it down, and I got a warning. So no strikes on my yet, but so we got to be careful what we say.
Let's go back to World Health Organization. Let's talk
about
it. Let's get on the topic then.
I wanted to say that I have a rare disease that wasn't found until 1980s, but they're now believing that with studying and collecting samples from people that it used to be they used to say it was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 5,000, and now they're thinking that it's even more common than that. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so it's a genetic connective tissue disorder, and as medicine, as you get more people into a study, and more samples, then you can actually stratify your results into being able to say, who's to say whether or not it's rare or whether or not physicians don't diagnose it. So it's not being diagnosed and it's underdiagnosed, which is true because I didn't find out I had it till I was 28, and that's actually the age of most common of diagnoses is at 28 for something that you were born with. So, with help from organizations like the World Health Organization and things like that, where we get more information from other countries who may be doing research in things that are not exactly top of other people's priorities, whether in the US or in other countries, vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the collaboration, right?
That's a whole issue too. Is under and overdiagnosis is a real thing. Yeah.
A lot of research too, like medical journals in the United States, right? You have to pay money. It's not like open source. What happened? We lost Ariane. Here she's back. I find when I was doing papers, I was going out of the country to get research because it's mostly open source in the rest of the world except the United States. But that's the other thing, and it's really important. Thank you for sharing that. That's a super important. That'd be awesome. We could do like a whole episode on that. And like, why do you think it's not until the late 20s it gets diagnosed?
Because by then, so it's a systemic illness. It affects your collagen. So I'm missing different specific proteins from my collagen. So it affects all my joints, my heart, all my organs. And so by the time you're in your late 20s into your 30s, I mean, there are some people who don't get diagnosed until they're in their 50s.
Right.
But things like POTS, things like gastroparesis, and then you have any type of prolapses, aortic.
So are you saying that it looks like other diseases first? I did the other one. I didn't do this. I accidentally clicked her off before, but I didn't do that.
Yeah, I'm back.
Is it genetic testing that is how it's identified? So is there, and it's just like obviously something not screened at birth, or
correct?
It's not part of like early screening at any point or something, because it'd be very expensive to screen.
Was it that it looked like other diseases first? I'm not sure if you answered that.
Yes.
So first they think common things being common, it looks like you've got POTS, or common things being common, it looks like you've got such and such. When you put it all together, though, they're like, oh, well, actually, it's not common, but we go to that first. You wouldn't diagnose someone with a rare disease first. You go to the
and the hypermobility is the part that most people fixate on. That people have hypermobile joints, but children are hypermobile to begin with, are more mobile for the most part because their epiphyseal plates haven't fused yet, and so there are sometimes where things like that can kind of get in the way. But the symptoms actually really start at puberty, where you're going to see more of the symptoms. And I got diagnosed with POTS actually before I got diagnosed with EDS. As a nurse, I just kept digging and was like, I also have these symptoms and these symptoms and these symptoms, and so
I'm doing that now.
Yeah,
I'm kind of doing that now because I've been given so many back diagnoses, and I also have episodes where I'm just hit, like I'm so tired I can't get up. Oh my god, I gotta lay down and I can't get up. They'll buzz my door because I have an Amazon delivery. I'm like, they can leave it at the door, and I'm like, why do I get like that? And I'm like, is my blood sugar dropping? I'm not diabetic. Is it like thyroid? But that would be a constant fatigue state. It wouldn't kind of come in episodes. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking up symptoms. I had a long talk with my doctor Wednesday, kind of just throwing ideas around about different things that might help my pain and different, and thank God I have a doctor.
You should look into EDS.
Into what?
You said you should look into EDS.
Right.
Yeah. Because
I don't know. Is there a test for hypermobility that you can do?
Yeah.
That one?
But it's called
I've
a
always been
Beighton
flexible
score.
though, so.
Yeah, it's called a Beighton score, BEIGHTON, and you can just do it. It's a physical exam. It's whether or not you have the ability to do. You get points for both sides because some people can do one side, some people can't do the other. Then you're going to do elbows. Do they go past? You're going to do knees. Do they go past?
They go past 180.
Do your knees go past 180? Yep, that's And then also you do hands to the floor. So stand up and then put your hands to the floor. And can you put the palms down? And then it's whether you have a family member, it's heterozygous. So you only need one parent. Yeah. So Now I know that I have a 50% chance of obviously passing it on if I had children. I'm 33 now, and at the start of last year, I ended up with a feeding tube. I'd have a major abdominal surgery, and then the next month I ended up with a peg J, because I have severe gastroparesis. And so I lost 30 pounds in like 2 months without trying.
Yeah, in a bad way. In a bad way.
In a bad way. Yeah, in a bad way. So, but like EDS is so pervasive into so many different systems, whether it be endometriosis, whether it be IBS, there's MALS or mesenteric ligament syndrome, where your mesenteric is actually pinched. So EDS is actually far more common, and the most common type is the hypermobile type, but there are 13 subtypes of EDS.
You know, this is on the one hand what makes healthcare and medicine fascinating, and on the other side, I'm right now training to be a nurse practitioner, and it's scaring the bejesus out of me, because it's like there's so much to know and so much, and that's why you try to keep on top of things, and I guess, and that's also why you look things up and work with other practitioners and a physician and try to, you know, it's just we're past the point of a doctor being able to know everything there is, or a nurse practitioner. I mean, 100 years ago, like I said, my mom probably knows as much as a doctor did 150 years ago. You know, they know, you know, soap and water and don't pick at it. Now there's just so much to know. It's incredible. I don't know how physicians do it. I have such a renewed respect for physicians and everything they have to cram into their brain, from the chemistry to the embryology, and then the disease process and the treatments and surgery and obstetrics and pediatrics and all the rotation. It's just, it's crazy. It's exciting because I love to learn. I don't think, I think medical school would probably be too much for me, but I do love to learn. So I can imagine that there are some med students, residents, who just love to learn and they just eat this stuff up. It's still challenging for them, no, but boy, it's overwhelming, and I have to just, you know, in my position, you know, on my little path to be a FNP, need to just take a deep breath and realize that there will be people around me and there will be up to date that I can get on and look things up. I know Chad
you
says
already know a lot. You know, I mean, you already know a lot. I think that it is that questioning, right? But it's a questioning. Does differential diagnosis, I think, is very complicated. And that's where it's always important to collaborate and find specialists and follow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm constantly having to teach people about my illness because it is so rare.
I get that.
And to go from the advocate for patients to having to really fight for my own advocacy, for my own health, because I'm disabled now. This is a disability. I can't work in the hospital anymore because I can't stand for that long. I just had hip surgery a month ago because my hip dislocated and I tore my labrum, and I had a deformity to my acetabulum that was there since birth, but nobody knew, and so they had to shave down my bone.
I was going to add, this brings up something that actually overlaps with something I talked about in one of my early videos on LGBTQ stuff, and that is, in that I was talking about coming out to your doctor and saying, look, I'm one of these things, LGBT or Q or some combination, so that they know how to interact with you on that level and know, you know, certain things. They don't have to ask a lesbian patient more than a couple of times if she's pregnant. It's like, no, I don't have sex with somebody who can get me pregnant, you know, just as one example. And I was saying in that video that it kind of behooves us to do this and to teach a doctor or a provider who doesn't quite get it, to teach them. Look, you know, just so you know, like my doctor didn't know top and bottom as terms for men who have sex with men. One is a top and one is a bottom. And she didn't quite understand what that meant. And I brought it up and she's like, oh, well, that's what that means. And I'm like, yeah, that's what that means. but I know some people don't want to take on that responsibility. And the same with somebody with a rare disease. You kind of take that, you have the decision, do I want to be the one who represents other people with this disease and teach people about it, teach my physician about it potentially, or my nurse or my caregivers in other places? Because on the one hand, it's not up to you to teach these people. They should be learning what they need to know elsewhere. But on the other hand, I think a lot of us feel compelled to use what we know to help our providers help us better, and then also potentially help other people in similar situations better. You've actually, sounds like you've chosen to be a teacher, a representative of your disease process, and that's great. But I just want to highlight the fact that you don't have to do that. And other people that have certain diseases, you don't have to do that. It's okay just to be the patient. And I've actually gone to my doctor, who I've had a long relationship with, and she's like, well, what do you think is going on? I said, I feel so bad. I just need to be the patient right now. Can you be the doctor? And I just be the patient.
Yeah. That's such an important conversation too, because like I was in the hospital for 10 days and I got put on TPN, had to get a PIC, like the whole 9, and then had major abdominal surgery. And I was in, so much pain and just in a bad way that I was like, I couldn't teach, I like you said, I was like, I just need to be cared for. Like,
well, that's where you need like a patient advocate too, and that's where it's almost like, I mean, I worked for a family whose daughter's twins had an incredibly rare disease. At the point that both of them had passed, they finally figured out what it was after the first one passed through autopsy. But it was like there were 20 cases in the world, and it was like this juvenile pediatric Parkinson's disease looking thing. It was like crazy, how it started when they were 8 or 9. It looked like something that doesn't exist, right? As we know it, because Parkinson's is not possible to have that as a kid. But and it's like, but there was like a book we had as a caregiver, and these girls were my age. I think I was 18 when I started working for the family, but we would have a book, basically a manual. And I think that it is hard because when you have a chronic disease or a degenerative chronic disease of any kind, I mean, if it's not like, diabetes or certain cancers, which are not considered chronic disease, it's very different, or CHF. But when it's these rare, unusual diseases, I think it's hard. It's a fine line. Like, that if you're not teaching, you're going to get substandard care, or maybe you're not going to get physical therapy or have the right orders, or have that, like, for example, for rehab purposes or pain management purposes, or the expectations of me as a nurse. Hey, get out of bed. You got a hip replacement. You got to get up in like 4 hours. We're going to be on the track. We're going to do a 5K tomorrow, right? I mean, so those are really important things. And I think it's very, with Pulse, the organization I'm part of, we do have some disease specific, from the patient's perspective, a catalog of videos. But I think it's very important because there's just so much to know, but it's hard. And that's why, private patient advocacy is really important, or having somebody who can check in and say, because again, everybody's busy, right? We've all been on that receiving of like, oh, I'm this and this person, their sister, their mom, their brother, whatever, husband, wife, this is the disease. And you kind of like tune out, like, because they're giving you some esoteric thing off of Google, or, rice wine vinegar tonics or something, you know what I mean? And then you're like but then you have to discern like what's actual information about a disease, what's really important. And I think that's hard to convey. I think it's hard for families to convey because they're emotionally charged.
I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm actually really excited by this because there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn about the disease process, and we've also touched a lot on like the patient experience of having illness, and being an advocate for themselves, and or having an advocate come and help them, and boundary setting, and like when I need to just be a patient. I can't be the medical professional right now. I need to be a patient, and then the broader societal kind of effects about healthcare. It's all very complex, and I think a lot of us in this room now understand a lot better. It doesn't mean it makes sense. It's just that we understand that it's complex. That there's people's beliefs about vaccines. There's the way people, there's the science of how disease spreads. There's the rare diseases and people's feelings about that, and advocating for themselves, and the knowledge deficits in the healthcare providers and how that can be, there's all of this together, plus the healthcare. We didn't even touch upon like insurance and, hospital administration and all that, and I won't let Liz do that.
But it's also about like the staffing too. I mean, that's why when you've got 8 patients in the ER, Scott, or you've got even NPs, right, with quotas, and like you got 10 minutes with your patient, it is so important. If we don't have time to actually reflect and actually do some research, this is what harms patients. There is no substitute.
That's what I'm saying. It's complex. There's staffing. There's nursing education.
Mm-hmm.
There's, are we cranking out enough nurses? Are we cranking out enough doctors? Medical education, public education on science and anatomy and physiology. I'm trying to draw some connecting some of the dots of this whole last hour and 20 minutes.
Sorry.
No, I'm just saying that it's there's so much there that it's and there's so many opportunities to learn more about each. When I think about research, like I may have to do one day, all kinds of questions we can ask. Is it better if we do this? If we teach kids in grade school what parts of their bodies do they come out later better able to take care of their own health? Do they manage their hypertension better when they've had a high school health course that covers cardiovascular disease and risk factor? I mean, there's just so much to know. What if we give doctors education on how to communicate with patients, or nurse practitioners for that matter, about communicating about research to patients in a way they can understand it, since we don't get that in our school, in our educational system. Let's see, Mel has something to say. Mel, I've not been ignoring you. I see your comments over there. Mel says, my desire to be able to help people navigate this stuff better is 100% why I'm in school. Yeah, I think we all realize that there's a deficit. People don't understand what's going on. And I've always enjoyed the patient teaching, especially because I think it works. I think I go in and and my role was in the ER, and I said, hey, the doctor just told you have a kidney stone. Do you know what that is? And they're like, yeah, I've heard of it. My uncle had one once. Like, okay, well, let's use the little whiteboard here, and we will draw some kidneys, and and afterwards they're like, thanks, I think I get it. No one's ever explained it that way. So if it was one thing to do that and then have them go, it still is kind of complex, I don't get it, would be one thing. But I think most of the time they're like, yeah. Or if they don't, and I've told people, like when I do my AFib bedside lecture, you're not going to remember all this, and I don't expect you to now become an expert in your new diagnosis. But let me go over it, and then the next time you hear it from your doctor, or you look it up on YouTube or Google or something, you'll say, oh yeah, that's what that tall guy in the ER was talking about. Okay. You need to hear it a couple of times. Let me just be the first time. And I think a lot of us find that part of it really satisfying. And my doctor, I was talking to her, and I told her about my preceptorship coming up, my clinicals, and how many patients they see a day. And she's like, oh my God, are you serious? She's like, I guarantee you, there's no psychosocial. I guarantee you, it's come in, take care of the disease, and send them out. There's no, how's your family doing? What do you do for a living? What do you do in your free time? How you been feeling? How's your mood? All that. She says, in that short amount of time, I guarantee you, there's no psychosocial. Now, she's the one that spends an hour with me every time I go in. So she's on the other extreme.
Yeah,
but she said
no time for that.
She said it'll teach you to focus, and then you don't have to work in that kind of environment forever. But this experience will teach you to focus. You got 15 minutes to examine, explain, diagnose, treat, move on to the next one. And it's too bad that we don't have more time. But that's
pressure's
the way
on. The pressure's on.
Yeah,
I think too. The other thing I want to add with special diseases, with rare diseases and really specific diseases, it's also important to pick your providers and specialists, and you can look and see what did they do their thesis on, what did they study, what did they do their postdoc in, what did they do their residency, internship, where did they go, who were their professors. So if you start, the thing is, if you look at literature, and you can just go on the NIH and look up a published study, and you look and see who wrote that, and then you look and see where did they teach medical school, and then you think, oh, okay, where did my provider go to medical school? Because by and large, I mean, there's not a bajillion medical schools. So again, you can sometimes trace that down and get a better provider, somebody more specific who has a higher probability of having some knowledge about your disease or disease processes. So it's very important. It's another way to look at it.
And it doesn't hurt to screen your doctor ahead of time. And I was talking about that as well with LGBTQ patients and say, call the office and say, I'm thinking about becoming a new patient there. I see you're taking new patients. Can I just ask you, does Dr. So-and-so see many gay men in his practice? Is that something that he's comfortable with? And sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, sure. We've got plenty of guys that come in here. Or they'll say, well, I don't see why not. And they're like, okay, well, and there's nothing wrong with and saying, hey, I carry this diagnosis. Is this something the doctor either knows about or is willing to learn about?
I do that. I have to do that. I mean, honestly, because I don't want to waste my time and I don't want to waste theirs either, to be really honest. And I have enough medical PTSD from having to interact with physicians who completely invalidate me as a patient, and just things that I've had to experience through the process of trying to get help for certain things. So I mean, it's best to try and be a part of, with rare diseases comes communities of people who can point you in the right direction. The EDS Society has an entire list of doctors per state who have been trained in the knowledge of EDS. So, you can do that for a lot of different rare diseases that have resources like that to help people be able to find doctors to help take care of them.
And I want to just say this because I had this happen with somebody that I know recently who has gone through a very difficult time with a surgery he didn't need and new problems on top of old problems, and just a feeling of helplessness and being kind of lost in the healthcare system, and plus having pain on top of all of it, and now feeling like not only can't you do the things you used to do, but now and you go for help and you're not getting the help you need. So now you have to actually fight to get the help you need and explain to people what you need to do and look for a new provider because the last one was had trouble and all this, and then he made a mistake along the way of going to a chiropractor, which hurt him further. And now, he's feeling guilty about that. And I feel very sorry for anyone that has to go through all that. And it's one thing to have a disease process going on or be sick. It's another thing then, to ask for help and either not get it or get the wrong help. And then feel like you have to not only deal with being a sick person when you used to be a healthy person, but now figuring out what you need to do to help yourself and maybe not having someone by your side to do that. It's difficult. I just want to recognize that that's difficult. And, some people, it's different for different people. Some people are sick, they get help, no problem. They have family around, they go to a doctor, the doctor helps them, the team helps them. Other people, they get the wrong help, they don't have anybody, they've got other issues, emotional issues, or whatever, and it's much more difficult for them. I just want to put some sympathy out there for anybody who has any kind of roadblock in the way.
Thank you.
Help that they need. Going back to our timeline, let's just see if there's anything here we want to touch on because we're coming up on time here. We almost eradicated polio. That's good. That's right after I graduated high school. Reproductive health.
We eradicated it, and then
emergency contraception. That was a thing, right? I mean,
the morning after pill.
Yeah, the emergency contraception was
as a gay man.
No, but it's the emergency contraception hits home to me because it meant that a woman who got pregnant, not through her own volition, we'll say that because YouTube doesn't like certain things, through some kind of assault, got pregnant, now didn't have to carry this pregnancy. Which would be PTSD every day for the rest of her life.
Yeah, so. if she didn't have access to abortion care.
Right.
This avoided the need for even that. And look at the dates on these things. Okay, this wasn't 1930 that we had a morning after pill. This is 1998. Medicine is young. Healthcare is young. Modern healthcare is young. Let's see.
I put in the comments too to just remember when you go to your provider, right? Because we all, as you get older, it's just going to be too much to recite verbally. Bring it in a list. Bring your medication list. Bring your healthcare proxy if you have a copy. Everything, all of your diagnosis, a list of your medications, all of your providers, any recent diagnostic tests, mammograms, colonoscopy, pelvic exams, whatever it might be. Have all that and you can bring it in and then your provider can scan it in the medical record. That is the best thing I can suggest to folks is bring a copy for them to scan in the record and make sure that they understand what are you currently taking. You may have prescriptions for medications, but are you actually taking those medications? Who prescribed them? And for you to state to your provider why you believe you are taking those medications. That's very important. Why do you believe you're taking those medications? Not, oh, it's for my heart.
Right.
Well, and it also may give insight as to why they were prescribed, because you can, there are many uses for different medications. So, and it could be, you get 2 to 3 different doctors prescribing cardiac meds, right? And sometimes they're in synchronicity and sometimes they're in opposing forces. So those are just really basic. So, do all those and you'll be in better shape than most people.
We had child mortality decline, although I think it was probably declining over a long
shame maternal mortality can't decline.
Yeah, maternal mortality, number one cause of female death in the world for 5 million years straight, right? I mean, other than I think there were a couple years.
I don't want to go into the whole abortion issue, but I do want to say that I was shocked to hear the risk for death from an abortion is this number, and it's 12 times as much for actual childbirth.
Childbirth
that may not be the right number, but it's much.
Yeah, childbirth is dangerous.
It is. You're
tracks that.
Producing a whole new human being. I cannot imagine.
Yeah, not always in really clean environments, not always, with the proper care and or even planning, girls giving birth, right? We're talking, girls who may be underdeveloped to even, be
Their
physically developed to have a baby safely, right?
I didn't realize this, though. This was a huge milestone. 2015, it says Cuba becomes the first country of the world to receive validation that it's eliminated mother-to-child transmission of HIV and syphilis. That's a thing.
I wonder how they did that. I wonder. Yeah, I didn't know that
just
either.
getting all the pregnant women on antiretroviral therapy as soon as possible. If not before they were pregnant, then as soon as they find out they are pregnant, imagine to decrease that risk. That's amazing.
But they have a robust, healthcare system.
Pregnancy and childbirth is not something gay men think about, and so the gay men who got AIDS, they're not thinking about passing it to unborn, to fetuses. But hey, guess what? Women get it too. People with uteruses get it, and if they get pregnant, that is a risk, and I'm sure something that was very important to a lot of people. So that's.
Well, we're also talking about Cuba, where homosexuality is illegal.
Not all that long ago.
Frowned upon, highly frowned upon. So the number of men on the down low is pretty high, as we say, right? So the number of men having sex with men who are then married, extremely high. It is not a.
Let's see. I'm just scanning this. Forget. The oral regimen for treatment of multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis. It's not a very sexy disease, but it's out there. It's always been out there, and it continues to be a problem. And in fact, I just studied my antibiotics modules to go for my class. And there's a 4-drug regimen we had to know for TB. I'm like, I thought it was 2. I thought it was rifampin and isoniazid. That was when you went to nursing school 30 years ago, Scott. And now it's 4 drugs.
It was the same when I went to nursing school. So
and you're younger.
I've been a nurse for. I've been a nurse for 10 years.
I seem to remember we treated a lot of people with TB or suspected TB, but I thought I was giving 4 medications on discharge. I don't know, but maybe is that in lieu of IV and combination? I'd be curious about that. Because I think there was always you had to give. I don't know that. You had to give IV.
I just remember it's
major treatment, but
I
that's
thought it was
another
one.
Tuberculosis. What is it? Yeah, I thought there was something, but very interesting about TB. TB is. So I had a patient. When we had TB patients, it was pretty big deal in the county I worked in. Like they were really on it. Like they would take people and arrest them and put them in a hotel. And, of course there wasn't, and, there'd be somebody like a nurse would come twice a day to ensure that they took their medication.
Yeah, that came up when we were talking about, like, can they force you to take a vaccine? I'm like, you know what?
Nobody gave a crap about anybody with TB, apparently, for 5 decades, right?
Yeah, right. And I said, you may not realize this, but when it comes to public health, certain liberties can be taken away from you. And I don't know if you know this, but with tuberculosis, they can take you into custody to make sure that you go through your treatment because they don't want TB spreading. And anytime I talked about this, and you have to remember, everybody, the government is us. Okay, we get together. I think of it as a little island. Nobody's on, and a bunch of people arrive. Like, okay, like Gilligan's Island. How are we going to live together? Well, we should make some rules. Because you took my coconut the other day, and I don't appreciate it. All right, well, let's make a rule. You can't steal each other's coconuts or bananas. Okay, and what other rules do you want to have? Oh, you can't hit each other. Okay, well, that's So we as a society, on an island of 100 people or a country of 330 million people, have certain rules. If we want to change them, there's mechanisms to change those. But we've decided that we're going to protect children. And if the parents aren't going to get them vaccinated, we're going to require vaccinations or something like that. That's probably a bad example. It's more like if a child needs a life-saving surgical procedure and the parents don't consent to it, you can get a judge to actually issue an order for them to do it without the parents' consent. Because we as a society have decided we're going to protect children even from their own parents. We will protect people from themselves in certain cases. Like if you're suicidal, we'll take you into custody and get you an evaluation. We will save you from yourself. If you're not taking your TB meds, we're going, for the good of the public, we're going to, do this. Now, if you want to change that, change the laws, change the Constitution, whatever that allows that to happen. But as it stands now, they can require that you take a vaccination for the greater good. But that's a discussion for 3 years ago. But it does overlap with what we just talked about with TB. And I don't know that a lot of people know that you can actually, I'm not sure what it's called. It's not being arrested so much, it's taken into custody, for supervised treatment.
Yeah.
But just remember, everybody, that you've got individual rights and then you've got the rights of the people around you. And where they bump up against each other is where we have that friction. So anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I think all of us here appreciate that. Adrian's like, no.
It's pretty interesting though, the whole makeup. I would find, I'm going to put you guys some links here because there's some great resources I found when I was doing a lot of research in the work I was doing in public health for the union during COVID, that I found all kinds of agencies and resources like buried in other agencies. And so, it's worth it to explore. There's a lot of great agencies in our government and public health that have great resources. I mean, and also, you can check out FEMA. FEMA is another, organization in the United States they have a lot of resources as well. Because, it is like it's disease, but it's also could be public or natural disasters. It could be diseases brought on by environmental changes. If there's a hurricane, a tornado, or something that happens that really disables the healthcare systems, hurricanes especially do a lot of damage. It's important to be involved, or the Red Cross. I always advocate for people to be involved, to volunteer, do those things. And you're going to learn a little bit more about how the systems work and how NGOs, non-government organizations work, and how our government works.
I think technically I'm an American Red Cross nurse. I enrolled when I was a nursing student because I was volunteering with their blood drives and all that. I have my little pin somewhere in a box. I just want to ask, as we start to wrap this up really quickly, in your own career, not the history of medicine or Western medicine or modern medicine, but just in your own career, can you think of something that was kind of a game changer or really welcome? And it could be like a new product, could be a new medicine, it could be a new procedure, a new policy, a new law, regulation.
Pure Wicks. I love a Pure Wick.
Look at my comment.
Tell us what that is.
We can eradicate polio. Don't care. We got a Pure Wick.
No, I don't care. Yes. Oh my gosh, Adrian. Yes. Okay, so a Pure Wick is basically like a external catheter that for women. So it has a strip like this that's made out of a cotton like fabric, and it wicks the urine, it's attached to suction at the wall. And so it will literally, it sits between the pubic bone on the bottom and then on the top. And then it literally just has low suction going on. And so when they go, it is sucked straight to the wall. And so you don't have to have any infection disease. You don't have to have urine everywhere. You don't have to, you can make sure that if the patient has any breakdown of their coccyx or anything like that, all of those dressings don't have to be changed every 5 seconds. It is a real game changer for ICU nurses everywhere.
Wow.
I love them.
All
inpatient. Yeah. It's
and because you don't get that deterioration of the skin as well, the skin breakdown, it's a big, because you've
and
got
for
that
men,
function.
there's always been the Texas catheter, a condom catheter that goes over the penis with a tube that they just pee into that and it drains it away. It doesn't get all over the skin. But women, obviously, that anatomy requires a different design of that's great. When did that come out? Do you know?
It came out about 4 years ago.
Really recently.
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah.
And a nurse invented it too. It's a nurse invention.
It was invented by a nurse.
Yeah.
Very, very resourceful things. Like I was like, I really think that would win for everybody if you work inpatient.
If you work inpatient.
Which are not Medicaid or Medicare covered, so you cannot use them at home, which sucks. But they sell.
What do you think, Chad? Everything in your wheelhouse that's changed, a game changer over your career?
Yeah. So 2 things, actually. Once upon a time, every time a woman would come in for labor, it was routine to cut an episiotomy. Episiotomy is just considered good medicine. Now, we don't cut episiotomies very often anymore. Sometimes we do. I've only cut a few in my career. We just kind of let you tear. I will cut an episiotomy if I can see that you're going to tear and I want to give the episiotomy someplace to go. If you tear, you're going to tear in whatever direction your body tears. If I cut a small episiotomy, at least nick the skin, it says, okay, tear here. And that's a little more controllable. But we don't do that very much anymore. With fewer episiotomies, there's fewer repairs, quicker healing. Women are a lot more pleased with it. The other thing is that once upon a time, the minute your cervix went to 10 centimeters dilation, we'd start pushing with you. You could push for 5-6 hours. Now, we let you go to 10 and we wait until we can see the head before we start pushing. We let you what we call slide or labor down, and it just lets the head come down closer. So now we don't push for hours and hours and hours. We push for a handful of minutes. We're done. So those are two innovations. ACOG says that you can be completely dilated 10 centimeters for up to 4 hours. Which that's 4 hours of letting your uterus bring it down rather than you pushing. And again, less trauma to your perineum, less trauma to your bottom, and it just makes a whole world of difference. So
great.
Those are 2 innovations or things that have changed.
Yeah, one policy and one procedure. Adrian, can you think of one thing?
I think I'm telling you, the PureWick was a game changer. But I think that there's just so many as an inpatient nurse, and I've seen things that have really benefited patients. I think the best thing that I was able to work with were staffing ratios, nurse to patient ratios. And it really makes it very difficult for me to think about going to an inpatient patient care position just to maintain my skills, because I just feel like I will flip out. I just feel like I will completely lose my what if somebody tries to give me like 8 tele patients that are like step down into 4 on vents or some insanity that nurses are dealing with. So I think ratios save lives. That's what we need. Shown. We need staff. Yeah, staff.
I forgot to tell people watching this live, put your answer to that question which way is it in the chat, and let us know what you think in your career or in your lifetime has been like a real game changer in nursing or healthcare or medicine. For me, my career's been in emergency nursing. The first thing that came to mind was end-tidal CO2 monitoring. It's just a very immediate way of monitoring how the lungs are exchanging gases. So really good in a code to know if you've got the heart started again. if they're getting ready to arrest, that kind of thing. That's kind of gadgety though. The other one was goal-directed therapy for sepsis, which came out, God, it's been 10 years now, maybe. A lot of people of all ages come in and they've got an infection that goes their whole body. And it used to be called septicemia or blood poisoning. And one of the things that happens is all your blood vessels just open up and then your blood pressure drops. And then you don't get blood to your heart and your brain, and then you can't arrest from that. They found that as soon as they can identify people at risk for this, and there's a screening that they do. I actually screened in when I went in for my first time with breathing, because my heart rate was elevated and I had a slight fever or whatever it was. I ruled in, and they came in, all the nurses came in, drew blood right away, got an EKG right away, started an IV right away. The doctor wanted to use an ultrasound, look at my vena cava and see how my, all this. And if they can get fluids and antibiotics into these patients really, really quickly, they live. How about that?
Within 30 minutes.
You've got 30 minutes
within
to start,
30 minutes.
30 minutes to start fluids and an hour for antibiotics, I think, something like that. And we get it in much faster, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And you look at the numbers, people are not dying. It's saving lives, saving a huge number of lives. It's not something you hear about on the news, because you hear about heart attacks and strokes. You don't hear about sepsis or this kind of thing. So that was a big game changer. And it's like, oh, you mean we have to rush in there and screen for something else now, and we got to do all this? But then you learn, hey, guess what? This extra work that you're doing is actually saving lives. Actually, people are not dying who would have died. So that's exciting. Karen Nicholas says Narcan, and that's not new, but and I'm not sure when it came out, but yeah, Narcan, especially now with the whole opioid
new
crisis,
availability,
new availability of Narcan and the intranasal Narcan that we can use now. That is a lifesaver too. If you have someone, if someone witnesses you overdose on an opiate, clot buster oh yeah, I forgot about that too. Clot buster medication instead of triple bypass. Yeah, I used to, anytime you had a heart attack, had to have a bypass surgery. And now we can do clot busters, and also good in strokes, by the way. We can give TPA, and I've actually seen it work. She came in, this lady, I remember the one, she came in with a droopy face and the limp on this side, and she's having I'm getting a delivery, but I'm not getting up, if you can hear that. With classic stroke symptoms, and she's like, and we're like, how long ago did it start? About an hour. And we're like, okay, we're getting this. We get the TPA going. Mm-hmm. Completely normal. Symptoms gone. I'm like, we cured her stroke. That's impressive. And then they also
more use of IR in today's medicine. I mean, like, I get my tube replaced in IR. So I don't have to go. Yeah.
Interventional radiology, they don't go to surgery and cut you wide open, but they do go somewhere where they can do x-ray and see what they're doing by the little things that they stick inside of you.
Well, and being able to draw those clots out too now. I mean, and cath lab nurses now. I mean, also cath lab nurses, let's just say they've had to like completely learn a whole new skill and a whole new, like, they're two nurses in one now. I mean, with all the neuro interventions, which is something new.
Mel says she's new on the nursing side of things, but from patient and patient advocacy, online portals are a game changer. Obviously not without issue, but so much better than all paper requests. So you can access your medical information on your computer and communicate with your providers online. I agree. I use mine all the time, and not every provider does.
I love reading the notes.
I just read mine from the other day too. And I told my doctor, I said, by the way, I read your notes and sometimes I find errors. So like, you said I don't have that. She goes, oh no, what I meant was this. And she goes, but that's good. Let me know if I make a mistake. I was telling her I get these symptoms, this like fatigue that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. I said, it's like depression without the emotional. It's like the physical part of depression. When you just have no energy and your body just kind of aches.
Chronic fatigue is really common with EDS. Brain fog.
And I'm not sad.
It's part of the dysautonomia.
Not sad, I'm not depressed, but I was trying to describe my symptoms, but it's like only the physical part. So in her note, she said, he says he's sad, but not suicidal. I'm like, no, I said I wasn't sad. So little things like that.
You should do
important, but it is fun to read.
Part of HIPAA law is you can request to have changes in your medical record.
You can.
And
challenge. I go back to my doctor. She can change something.
Because sometimes this is really important to correct these things, because you may go for a job that you're not thinking you're going to take now, but they might do a security clearance check, and that could disqualify you from a security clearance check job, like with the federal government or a contractor or on a military base. You have to have a clearance.
Yeah.
So it's always good because then that will be a stop of pause and questioning on a security clearance for sure.
That's true.
So
For some
anything
people,
emotional.
For me, it's trivial.
Yeah. But then
people,
you never know. Maybe the federal government, the military base is going to pay you $250,000, and you're like, that's $100,000 more than I'm making. You know, they pay really good actually, and they use a lot of NPs, and the VA system also. You have to have a security.
Infinite Mind joins us a lot.
Hey.
So PCR.
Yeah.
Tell me what PCR stands for. It's not registering.
PCR, like if you were doing a stat by the bedside for like a lactate level, like a lactic level.
Oh, you mean like point of care testing?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And great for providers at difficult positions. Oh, you know what I just thought of, which is brand new. And I'm trying to think because just because it's new doesn't mean it's more important than something that came out 20 years ago, like goal-directed therapy for sepsis. But something that just came out are these continuous glucose monitors, which I think is amazing. You can just pick up your phone and go, oh, yeah, you know, it'll alert
the
you. Dexacoms and the other one. And now I think they're actually connecting them to insulin pumps. To me, that sounds like an artificial pancreas. If it can detect your blood sugar and deliver insulin accordingly, to me, that's an artificial pancreas. You know, so I'm going to be learning about this. I have a test next Tuesday on diabetic medications and management of diabetes. We didn't talk about it because it's a new technology, but I look forward to hearing about it and learning more because it's always been, haven't we all felt, I don't think any of us here are diabetics, felt sorry for diabetics. They've always got to like prick their fingers. They got to test it before every meal, and then they got to do the insulin thing. And no one likes to give themselves shots. And you're just always thinking about your exercise and what you eat and all that. What a miserable existence. They're strong, brave people, and they do learn to live with that. We all learn to live with our limitations. But wouldn't it be great if those people didn't have to do that anymore? And I think this, from what I've heard so far, may be a game changer for those folks. And isn't that wonderful to not have to do that?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the longer acting, like I think that the technology coming up will be more implantables, more long term. I mean, look, we need to have like some level of like even psych meds and some things that, you know, can last or have a little bit longer lasting effect.
Yeah, especially for psych meds, right? For people who won't necessarily take a medicine every day because they don't have the wherewithal necessarily.
The non-compliance.
Yeah, or non-adherence. No, we don't say compliance anymore.
Right.
Compliance. To be politically correct, okay.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Police.
No, they're not adherent. And then, in their defense, they're not able to. They're not thinking clearly, or they, you know, whatever, don't understand always. So yeah, if we can give them something long-acting, that would.
And I think also like hallucinogens are going to be, you know, like we're already seeing like the psilocybins and that use. I think that's also going to be really emerging. Yeah, I think it's going to continue to emerge.
Chad, didn't you ask me about that the other day? About the
we did have a talk about that.
Yeah.
I think in different states. I mean, these are the weird things in my mind because of, you know, kind of other things going on politically in this country. I'm like, so everybody's okay with that. You know, like, right? Like, it's like, okay, great. You know, everybody's okay with smoking pot. All right, great.
Well,
you know, it's
once you as an adult realize the world does not make sense, your life becomes a lot easier. And the world doesn't make sense, especially in a country that says you can't, you know, smoking cigarettes is bad. We're going to highly regulate that. You want to take these hallucinogens we'll approve the research for that. Alcohol, which completely ruins your liver and your life and all that, completely legal. I mean, if we were banning drugs based on their actual
and nationalized,
we would have no alcohol. But we tried that once. It's called prohibition, and it didn't work. But
blue laws is another thing. Blue laws are another thing I was like keenly aware of. So Scott, in most of the United States, the private sector doesn't actually sell alcohol. This is another interesting thing where it's actually like socialized alcohol. I don't know what to call it, like state owned.
Yeah, they've
like
repealed it.
In Virginia, it's like there's 300 outlets or something. Like it's a big deal if a new outlet opens up and it's like 600 million in tax dollars. All the profit goes back to the government, but it's crazy. Like when you leave California.
And on the other side, it's culturally, alcohol is part of the culture. It's like telling the French not to drink wine. You know, in our country, it's beer and it's all kinds. You know, but I mean, in general, it's part of our culture. And if we said we want to get rid of it because it's so dangerous, it contributes to, you know, DUIs and accidents. Accidents like I see so many alcoholics just fall over and hit their head on a table. That's trauma,
right?
And alcohol-related trauma.
Well, there's like a theory that Germany has it right.
And
you reverse the age of drinking and driving. You learn how to drink before you can drive in like Germany, and there's less DUIs because people like kind of get it out of their system. But yeah, I think it's. But I mean, I think that I think that the use of. I mean, part of what has fueled this momentum is obviously money, but it's that the rapid treatment and effects, and that the Freedom of Information Act opened up all of the suppression of information and data from 50 years ago about the use of these, you know, medications that, you know, nature, there are these things called mushrooms and they're kind of weird and unusual. And they have some really unusual properties all the way around, you know. I mean, if you cook with medicine,
you know, nature.
Yeah, I mean, we get them from nature, but we've known about, and it's unfortunate we haven't used this, but it's also, we're not developing psychiatric meds or even figuring out how the brain works. And if we can give somebody a dose of something or ketamine and have them like, boom, you know, they're cured or maybe for 5 years or 10 years, that's amazing without having the side effects of medications.
And Karen says when she was a new nurse in the late 80s, hip would lead to so many complications because you stayed in bed for so long. I imagine part of it. And joint replacements have increased life expectancy and quality of life. Yeah. And that was one of the things early in my career. They're like, by the way, you're going to be a new nurse here in the 90s. Back in the 80s and the 70s, we used to have patients in bed until they felt well. You're coming into the nursing at a time in the early 90s where we're getting people up the next day. Just so you know, the older nurses you work with are going to be freaked out by that, but you need to know the best thing for them to do is as much as they can get up side of the bed, standing side of the bed the first day. That's not the area I went into, but that was relatively new when I was a new nurse. So I want to say thank you to all of you guys for joining me on for a couple of hours and giving up your Friday afternoon, and everybody watching for interacting with us, and that makes it so much more enjoyable for all of us, I think, because it takes the pressure off us to figure out what to say. When we can have cues, we can you know, take off on an idea that you type into the chat. So thanks so much. Mr. Midwife has his own channel on YouTube. Please check it out. He just put up a World Health Day video today. Nurse Adrienne has all kinds of social media you can see around her in that fake library that she's sitting in.
And I'll have this video on my channel too. So I'm broadcasting simultaneously.
I'll try to put everybody's link down here for the people watching this on a replay. Ariane, thanks so much for joining us. Do you have social media that you need to link to?
Yeah, I'll throw it into the chat. It's at LadyGov32.
Great. And of course, I'm here, and I haven't. Where is it? Why have these? Oh, I deleted it. I have an email it's thenursescott@gmail.com. If you want to get in touch with me and not in the chat, somewhere more private, by all means. If you want to sponsor a video, if you want to be a guest, if you want to be an interviewee, I'm getting some of those lined up as well. So appreciate it. Thanks to everybody. Good health to all of you. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, check these guys out, and we will all see you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Oh, wait, I got an outro. Wait, I got an outro. Hi guys, thank you so much.
You're still live, Scott.
I'm wondering, do I have to do something to? It says you are live.
I'm still live. Hey everybody, this is what we do when we go backstage. We say, hey.
It says you are live on mine. Are you live?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
How do we stop it?